Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, it's Friday, it's prep day. Some of you know what I mean by that. Getting ready for a day of rest tomorrow. I'm telling you, I need it this week. It's been a rough week in the sense that it's been really busy. Just really busy. Just haven't stopped. And so I'm looking forward to that tomorrow. A lot of things going on in the world. Some of it's quite serious. This whole banking stuff. I don't know if you've been following that in the last 24 hours. For those of you that pay attention to the stock market and trading and stuff, there's some banks that are on the verge of collapse that are starting to look very similar to Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, that kind of stuff. You remember that back in 2008 or whenever. Not looking very good. I think that was the top 4 largest banks in America yesterday lost $47 billion in value total. Been talking about this kind of stuff, folks. The banking doesn't look very good. Not saying that it is going to happen right now, but a lot of people that are market experts are getting pretty nervous that we could start seeing some insolvency issues with some of the banks out there that could lead to a very large financial crash. And there's just other things going on. China is, it looks like, and I'll go into this in another video, maybe today or something, that they're kind of getting their foot in the door on the issue between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And apparently, they've been able to establish some level of negotiations between those two countries. And if that happens, it's gonna change a lot, because one of the things that gives our currency its value, as we've said, is the fact that it's the global reserve of the oil, petrodollar. And one of the reasons why that is so that we have pledged to support and protect Saudi Arabia from Iran. And if that's no longer an issue, how will that affect the U.S. dollar as a petrodollar, which has been weakening? Russia and India are already exchanging oil and products with currencies other than the U.S. dollar, and there's been talks about other countries doing that also. We've mentioned that a few times. So there's just some serious things going on with that. But I wanted to talk about something else, and some of you may get it what I'm going to say in this subject, and others may think it's taking things a little too far. We're not quite there yet, guy, man. Why are you talking about this level of bad things? Well, if you've been watching the last few days of videos that I've put out, probably have kind of getting a kind of understanding the theme that all this stuff that's happening, it's bigger than a World War III or a pandemic or a financial collapse. I mean, those are pretty big things, but we're watching the chessboard being moved around to put us into a place of this complete takeover of the New World Order, Agenda 2030. Remember what I said? All roads lead to this agenda, this great reset, this beast system. It's what it's all leading to. And we have to kind of think about that, because it's going to drastically change things for us as this progresses. It already has, but the likelihood that it will worsen in a way that many people, even preppers, haven't even really thought about, well, we kind of need to get ready for that, because the kind of things that they're talking about would make most of us outlaws and outcasts of society. And that's probably the first point that I want to make. are you preparing in a way, mentally and physically, are you preparing in a way to be an outcast and an outlaw? And I know some of you say, I'm already an outcast. I don't think like any of these people. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something like you might see in an apocalyptic movie or something. These folks that live in little villages on the outlying parts of the town and out in the wilderness, and they're not allowed to come into town. They're not allowed to participate. They're considered the criminal element, not because of the crimes that they commit, but because that they won't fall in line with the status quo. That's kind of what I'm talking about, that we need to be preparing ourselves for that, because it's a very strong likelihood that that will happen, at least in my opinion. How well are you prepared for that kind of world? For a world that has moved on without you? A world that has advanced technologically, that has changed very much the whole rule system. It's all changed. Something new, never before seen, and you are left behind. Some of you might say that's a good thing, and I'll agree that that's true. But it's going to drastically change our lives. And we need to be preparing for that. Are you preparing to just absolutely not be part of society because you're not allowed? I think of some movies that I've seen in the past depicting end times, folks that don't take the mark. They're trying to sneak around in society, blend in so that they can get their food and then get out. I don't know that it'll be that way with the level of technology and surveillance that's being developed. I don't know that that's even possible. This idea that you can come up with some falsified ID so that you can sneak in, get some groceries, and leave. I think it's going to be a very different world. And even though this sounds like some extreme dystopian movie, I think that we should probably at least give it some thought. Because if the world that these elites want to create happens, then that's very possibly what we're going to face. That we will have two choices: to give in and give up and do what they tell us to do, or to live completely outside of that. And living outside of that's going to be a drastic change. We're not going to have the things that we're used to having right now. It's not going to be that way. You're not going to be able to go to the hospital or doctor in an emergency. You're not going to have any kind of social services, protection. You're not going to have the infrastructure, utilities, things like that. It's just not going to exist. This is why I push very hard on this idea of self-sufficiency, small group self-sufficiency, out and far away as you can of big cities. Because when you're not just looking at the possibility of what could happen, but actually listening to the words that a lot of these elites say, this is exactly what they say, that these 15-minute cities, these virtual concentration camps, these smart cities, they're not going to be open for people to just come in and out when you want, unless you have the proper paperwork. And for those of you that don't have the paperwork, that don't do their bidding, you're not going to be allowed in these cities of all the things that's available. You're not going to be allowed in society. And I don't know that a lot of people are thinking about that. We as a people, especially Westerners, we're very narrowly focused on what's going on at hand. That's why we see so many various things happen in the news, and everyone's focus shifts gears all the time. oh, it's the Ohio thing. Oh, it's a balloon. Oh, it's, it's this. It's a laptop. It's, it's always something. And we get hyped up about it, and then we shift gears to something else and forget about what we were talking about yesterday. They know that, and they're going to play on that. But the thing is we don't plan for the future too much. We don't see what's potentially could happen in the future, down the road, the end of the road. And when you start to see and think about what could happen down at the end of the road, well, it's way worse than just some type of global war or economic collapse or famine or anything like that. It's a complete changing and restructuring of the world that we live in, to the point that folks like you and I aren't going to be part of that plan. And so we have to now start making our plans and figuring out how we can do it to exist, survive, and not be part of that world. I know it's extreme. I'm not saying it's 100% that it will happen, or at least that it will happen now or in your lifetime. But according to the theys that are trying to rule the world, that's what they say, that's what they want. And we'd be foolish to not think about that. How bad is this going to get? How extreme is this going to be? And how little access will we have to virtually anything? Right now, folks like myself and many of you that live outside in the wilderness, well, we're able to go to town when we need to. Yesterday, my wife and I, small little town, but went into town and picked up some groceries and came back home. That may not happen in the future. It may not be allowed. It may not be what? It may not be safe. We may not be able to leave our areas. It may be kind of a Hunger Games on steroids kind of thing. You have to stay within your district. And for us, that would mean you're not allowed to go into the places that would have supplies. Not able to resupply. You're not able to get the help that you might need. And so when you are making your preparations and your plans, I would advise you to think about this. What would you do if you were cut off from the rest of the world? How would you survive? How would you make it? It's going to be very different. It's going to be very tough. And this is why I advocate strongly of trying to find other like-minded people working together, because that's going to make it a lot easier. People that live relatively close. And when I say close, I'm talking like, probably a 7-mile radius close. I know that sounds really close for you folks living out here in the sticks. You're like, man, 7 miles, maybe 10-mile radius. Because you get much further than that, and it's going to make it difficult for you folks to really come to each other's aid when you get past that 7-10 mile point, especially when things get really bad. I mean, the whole point is to come and help each other. And if you live an hour away from your person of your tribe, how are you going to come to their aid and help them? So try to build coalitions and relationships with people in your direct area, because at some point it's very possible that that's all you're going to have, that you're going to have to figure out how to make it without being part of the system. While the cities, they may have all kinds of stuff and technology and food and modern this, and it may just be this big utopian. Out and away from that, it could be very much a feudal type primitive system. And so I think that while it may not necessarily be the highest priority in your preparations, you should certainly give it some thought, because when you start looking at the long-term plan of what they're wanting to do and how they're wanting to set things up, it's not going to leave any room for folks like you and I that live like we do, that believe like we do, that refuse to have government intrude on our lives like we do. And so for folks like us, there's not going to be a lot of other options if you want to continue with your beliefs. You're going to have to live outside of that. And outside of that's going to be rough. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very much like some dystopian movie. And so I would advise you to start thinking about that now. Figuring out how you could make it work. I've said many times, on our homestead, our family, we view our property as an island. And so the food that we grow, the things that we produce, the way that we prepare, we do it in a way as if we were completely cut off from the outside world. I'm not saying that will be the case, but that's just how we view it. That's how we plan. So I would recommend doing that. Kind of view yourself and your property as an island on its own. And what do you have to do to get yourselves prepared to survive in that way? Because when you do that, you have a much better chance of making it. This world that they're trying to create, I think it's going to be much worse and much more shocking than most people are prepared to handle. And we need to be getting ready for that, folks, in very serious ways. Right now, it's time to get your house in order. It's time to prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.